Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Rob, the Bearded Bible Thinker. Welcome to another episode of the Bearded Bible Thinker podcast. And today I'm going back into the terrifying, spooky, scary world of X. And I'm going to jump back into some bookmarks that I have been meaning to get to and just haven't. It has been a busy season in my life and my family's life and in church, the church life and the church that I pastor, and a lot is going on. And so I just have not gotten around to doing much of this. So I do want to jump into this just straight away. This is one bookmark that this is Dusty Deevers speaking on the floor. He is a legislator from Oklahoma. He's actually a pastor who is also has been a representative in his state, a state representative since 2023, I think it is. And so we're just going to listen to him talk here. This is something I bookmarked actually quite a while ago. You can see the date on the screen here is that it is actually from May 29th. Of 2024, when he actually was giving this spiel to the other members of the legislature there. But this is about 15-minute long video, and he's talking about birth control. A lot of really good things to know about birth control that, frankly, that a lot of people don't know about birth control. So I'm no expert on it, but he's certainly done a lot more research on it than I have. I've heard many of the things that he does mention here before from other sources as well. And so this is just a good, I think some good facts are going to come out here. And hopefully this will be a helpful thing to hear him talk about. He's going to, well, I'll just let him get to it. He's going to tell a little bit of his own story, I think, is how it goes. And then he is going to get into some of the facts surrounding the abortive nature of many of the leading birth control options. So without further ado, let's just jump in and listen to this guy.
Many of you know I'm very passionate about this issue. This is a large and complex topic.
I hope you can hear that.
This bill provides an opportunity to share many of the things that I've learned about the subject of abortion and hormonal birth controls. And this conversation, I understand it may take longer than some of us would desire, but I can assure you
that
I am not
right
attempting to stall or disrespect the members or the author in any way. I simply want to take this opportunity to demonstrate how far we have come, and that we have, in the conversation about contraceptive drugs. On page 2, this bill says that it will exclude medications that could be used to terminate an existing pregnancy, but that would include all hormonal birth controls. And so I need us to have this conversation.
Pause, Rob. Okay. So I'm unfamiliar with the Senate bill that he's looking at. It's an Oklahoma thing, and it was obviously from earlier this year. But apparently in some of their abortion legislative work or whatever the Senate bill is, it mentions that whatever the rules are, that it will exclude any drugs that can cause an abortion, right? So that's the layman's way to say what he said, I guess. But and then he made the point right away that if that is true, if this passes, if this is what we're going to talk about, then that would include all hormonal birth control options that are out there. Now that I think is the point. I don't know what the Senate bill is. I don't know what the particular legislative thing that they're looking at is, or what he's reading in front of him there. And for this discussion, none of that matters. What does matter is what he's getting to. That was a good plug, by the way, for any pastor. Listen, this is going to take longer than probably maybe it could, and I found that pretty good. But let's keep going. He's going to talk about the fact that a lot of hormonal birth controls actually can be abortive in nature.
And to know, I didn't know this. Before my wife and I were married in October 2003, she did what most of her Christian women friends did and started on hormonal birth control. And she asked her doctor for an IUD because her friends were using them and they told her that they were the best way to go. And our doctor told my wife that she would not prescribe IUDs because she was a Christian, and that because IUDs cause an embryo to be sloughed off in the lining of the uterus and it would kill the baby. So IUDs would be abortifacient. Well, we didn't know anything about that.
So that's important. That how long ago was that? How long ago did he say that was? Anyway, this was some time ago. Because he's going to say here in a little bit, I think one of his kids is 19 years old or something. Like this stuff has been known by the medical community for quite some time. And it's really not out in a lot of public knowledge. And the terrifying thing is that there are very likely, several, countless Christians who have been ignorantly, just unknowingly using birth control that they had no idea maybe was actually terminating life. Not preventing life, terminating it. So he'll, I'm sure, get into some of the details of that here in a bit. I'm foggy on some of those details, but he'll explain it, I think, here in a second. But that's a terrifying thing, or at least it should be for us Christians. I think that probably there have been many, 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 many children unknowingly killed by their Christian parents, just because their Christian parents didn't know all the facts. So, anyway, check this out.
And it was news to us, and so we didn't know why we were just learning this so late in the game, but no one in our community told us. And so my wife's OBGYN explained that other birth controls were abortifacient as well, but she believed that it was much smaller percentage, so we moved over to the patch, which is replaced every week and not worn during the week of the cycle. And when my wife's cycle did not...
Okay. Much smaller percentage would indicate, I don't know if this is what he means by this or not, but it seems to me that indicates that what the OBGYN was telling them is, I'm a Christian, I'm not going to do this IUD for you because it's abortifacient. It will terminate a pregnancy. It'll take a life. But some of these over here, that percentage is way less, even though they're still abortifacient. So let's move to those. Like that doesn't seem very consistent, because if there's a 1%, that's too much, right? But anyway.
Come, she was afraid to put on another patch, but sure enough, we ended up pregnant with our first child, who's now 19 and he's in another country right now on mission work. We wondered if we would have replaced the patch, if we would have lost him, and we also wondered if we had lost him, or if we had lost, or dare say, killed other children. A little while later, during my master's seminary studies at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, Dr. Albert Mohler, who's the president of Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, spoke to us at a chapel session about abortifacient birth control that kills babies in the womb. And he warned us that many of us were killing our own children without knowing it. And many families were shocked and had no idea of the horrors of what had been merely accepted as normal family planning. And my prayer is that most of you will not be shocked about this information, but my guess is many will. And here's what follows merely scratches the surface on hormonal abortifacient birth control. And now around 9.6 million women are taking oral abortifacients, and many people are legitimately uninformed. They really don't know, or they're misinformed, they were wrongly told, or are willfully uninformed. They don't want to know about hormonal birth control. Even still, if we are going to rescue those who are being carried away to death, we must reject hormone.
So, okay, by that statement, it seems as though whatever bill they're talking about, they are working on the side of life here in this situation. I know Dusty Deevers is, but this is interesting. So when he said willful ignorant or willfully not knowing, so if that's the case, then it's actually your fault. If that's true, then it's actually your fault that you didn't want to know. You don't want to know the mechanisms or what it is. But I would wager that they're probably the greater majority of at least Christians in this. I would hope that the great majority in the world of the Christian world of women and husbands, for that matter, who are in some way partaking in this world of hormonal birth control, that probably it's not like willful ignorance. It's probably there are quite a few more people who either just weren't told, who just didn't know to ask, something like that. I think that there's been a lot of just didn't know any better in our world. That there are very blatant ways to have an abortion that everybody knows about. This, I think, is kind of a sneaky thing, and not necessarily that there are 12 people around a long, ominous table in a dark boardroom somewhere, planning to keep these things a secret. But it is no secret, right, that we have against us the father of lies and the great deceiver. And I'm no conspiracy theorist, but there is one conspiring against us and against the kingdom of God, and so the more secretive he can make all of these kinds of things, well, that's way better for his cause, at least for now.
Hormonal birth control. From the moment of fertilization, which is conception, all human beings are fearfully and wonderfully created in God's image by, through, and for Jesus Christ to the glory of God, and all souls belong to him. Thus they are a sacred gift. And so to murder any preborn image bearer during any stage of development is to violate the sixth commandment that says you shall not kill, and to violate the unalienable right of the child, the unborn child, to his life, liberty, and property.
I love that there is a whole movement of, so there kind of are two ways to go about this legislature thing that you see anyway. And I'm not an expert on either, but one of those ways is there are a group of well-meaning Christians who are just attempting to create legislative work that will just get, like, strategically, like anything that will get them just a little bit more toward the goal, a little bit more toward the goal. And then there are other people like Dusty Deevers here and Bradley Pierce and other folks like that who like they just are very blatant about it. They're listing scriptures. These are the commandments that we're violating of God, the actual one that's actually creative, that actually has authority here, more authority than any legislator or president or king or sultan or dictator will ever have. He's the God who created life. He's the God who creates every individual life, and da 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 da. Right, and so those are kind of two different philosophies. This one is just very blatant and sort of like prophets of old, where you're just proclaiming it like this is the truth, accept it or reject it, and so it's and both. This one appeals to me more because I'm a preacher and this is kind of how I am. But I mean, I understand the reasoning for the other approach where you just kind of strategically work as best you can to get the ball rolling in the right direction. And so, but just wanted to point that out. There are typically kind of those two different ways that people approach this kind of thing in the world of, government.
And from fertilization or conception,
that I've seen
a new,
anyway,
fully unique human being is created and possessing God-given worth, whether it is implanted in the uterus or not. So friends, the popularity of chemical and hormonal birth control within and outside of these walls is no grounds, whether before the eyes of God or diminishing the moral abomination of destroying our preborn neighbors in the womb. Let me say this. If you don't know about the mechanisms
Dude's
of
preaching,
action
man.
and how birth control works, hormonal birth control works, you need to know there are three mechanisms of action. The first.
Okay, so this is how it actually works that he's going to explain, I think. And this is important, right? Because I think what the abortion bit in these birth controls is, I think anyway, well, let's hear what he says, but I think that the abortion bit in these birth control mechanisms, I think it's like the final thing. I think it's like, okay, we're going to try to stop the pregnancy from happening. We're going to try it again in this way. And if these two things don't work and the sperm and an egg meet and the implants in the uterus or whatever, we're going to keep it from being able to do that. And so there's a life that's created, and then we'll kill it if that is the last resort. I think that's kind of how it works, but let's hear what he says. First mechanism.
Well, before I say that,
okay,
let me just say, all known chemical hormonal birth control, which are contraceptives, these methods, whether they're pill, patch, rings, implant, injection, IUDs, or the abortion pills, have an abortifacient mechanism of action that prevents the embryo's implantation. How? By thinning the lining of the endometrium, or the lining of the uterus, which is the endometrium, and thereby causes the embryo to not be able to attach, and so it's aborted. Okay, so that's how it actually works. I was wrong. It doesn't even implant. That's the thing that actually happens. So the embryo is the life. The embryo is egg, sperm have met. There's a life conceived. There's a life that has all of the same worth that anyone who's breathing outside air right now does, that has been conceived. And the birth control mechanism stops. It thins the lining of the uterus, and the embryo is not able to implant and develop further. And so it essentially it keeps, so it in a way it would be like you're not necessarily shaking the baby to death. You're just not feeding the baby until it dies. So you're not doing an actual action to like some abortions, like where there are baby body parts afterward. What you're doing is you're keeping there's a life that's been created, and you're keeping it
you're not giving it what it needs to survive, and so you kill it by creating an environment in which it cannot survive.
In the menstrual cycle. So let me say it another way, just for clarity. Whether single hormone, progestin only, or a combination of hormones utilizing man-made or synthetic estrogen and progestin, which is levonorgestrel, they all inhibit a woman's natural hormones, thus preventing or terminating pregnancy according to the physician's desk reference and the Merck manual. It lists the hormonal contraceptives of having 3 mechanisms of action. And those mechanisms are, first, to attempt to delay or hinder ovulation. That's the release of the eggs. The second would be to thicken the mucus so that the sperm would not be able to travel up to through the fallopian tube. The third mechanism of action is the abortifacient mechanism. And all of these work on those third mechanism. And that is to thin the lining of the uterus, the endometrium, and prevent the embryo from implanting on the cervical wall and be sloughed off. And when that happens, this mechanism of action is...
So a good example, a good illustration of what's happening here is this is still abortion. If the first 2 things don't work, this is still abortion. Okay, so this is kind of like someone is coming at you, and you give one warning shot. You give one more warning shot. Oh, that doesn't work. So you shoot him in the face, right? Like this is kind of what's happening, except the person who's coming at you is utterly innocent, is the most innocent that a human could possibly be in our fallen world. Just unable to help itself, the most helpless as well. There's nothing more widow and orphan category fitting than an unborn child. So that's the idea. There are 2 things that they attempt to do it this way. They attempt to prevent it this way. If neither of those work, we'll just create an environment in which the baby dies.
It's embryocidal. It kills an embryo.
Embryocidal. I like that.
That includes abortion or the murder of a human embryo. Since a new human has been created at fertilization, which is conception, but this human being is killed because she is both prevented from receiving the nourishment provided by her mother's uterine wall and is sloughed off in the mother's period.
It's good that he uses she, or he would have been fine as well instead of it. That's helpful because it is either a she or a he. It's not an it.
Now, why do we not know all these things? Well, in the 1960s, let me just say where birth control came from very quickly. In the 1950s, Margaret Sanger, arguably the most deadly eugenicist of all times, persuaded scientists to create a hormonal birth control pill to inhibit pregnancy. She wanted to limit the ability of undesirable populations to procreate through birth control and sterilization. And so, before the 1960s, the 2 terms fertilization and conception were the same terms. They were synonymous, defining the beginning of a pregnancy. Fertilization happens at the moment of the egg and sperm membrane fusion and the formation of a one-celled embryo called a zygote. And from that moment thereafter, the embryo formed exhibits all characteristics of a new, genetically distinct human organism. Biologically...
You know what? One of the things that is frustrating to me, I don't want to jump to conclusions, and so but just the look of things, it looks like there might be a guy like at the center top of the screen that's actually listening to what he's saying, and most everybody else is just kind of putting up with it. I don't know what to make of that, but that just the look of this is kind of frustrating. A bunch of empty desks. I suppose that's the other team that's just not there that day. But anyway, that no one treats this. There are very few people that treat this with the gusto that it ought to be treated, with which it ought to be treated. This is a travesty that outweighs any slaughter of any people group in the history of mankind, and probably probably combined. The amount of unborn children that are slaughtered, whether knowingly or unknowingly, like in some of these cases, in our nation, simply because Margaret Sanger, Satan's love child, or some others throughout the years, and then now a whole host of people who just want to be able to have sex whenever they want, with whomever they want, however they want, with no one in their business. It's really what it boils down to. This is nobody. God, as Christians, we have to understand. This should make us very angry. This issue of abortion should infuriate us. The people who are oppressed by it, by the lies, right? We do legitimately have young people today who don't really know, who have actually just been taught that there are still, believe it or not, even though it's out there, even though the argumentation isn't even scientifically, it's laughable, there are still a host of folks out there who, maybe because they're not connected or something, who still believe that this is just a clump of cells, or who still don't understand that this is actually a life. That actually still exists. Now, we're coming to a place where it seems like you have to be attempting to not know, but there still exist those who really just don't know, and there, at the same time, there are many who do understand. I'm taking a human life, and then there are the far other side of that. There are plenty of folks who understand, yes, I'm killing my baby and I don't care. And those people should get capital punishment. So this is the Holocaust of our time, except it far outweighs the Holocaust in damage done. We just don't see all of the damage. There are no walls created with names on them, or memorials or anything like that being placed in national places where we can remember the slaughter of the innocent. That just doesn't happen with abortion, unfortunately, because frankly, I don't think we have enough marble in the world to list all of the names, should they have been named, of these innocent children. Okay, I'm done with my rant. Let's continue to listen to what he's going to say about the science part.
Speaking and biblically speaking, life begins at fertilization, which is conception. However, you might be shocked to know that in the 1960s, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists, ACOG, defied biology and scripture and divorced the two terms and redefined conception to be at the completion of implantation on the uterine wall. And in this way, they created a conscience-soothing workaround. Abortifacient hormonal birth control now could be deemed as non-abortifacient, because they just changed the definition. Whereas it once was fertilization and conception at the same time, now it's fertilization, what happens at the union of the sperm and egg. But in the 60s, they just changed it. Nope, conception is not until after completed implantation. And they defied all prior, the scriptures and knowledge. So in this way, we have mothers and fathers not understanding that when prescribers say this is not abortifacient, that it actually is killing an embryo if it takes work on the third mechanism of action. And neither prescribers nor mothers and fathers had to contend with their conscience anymore if conception is post-implantation rather than at fertilization. And so, most birth control methods are labeled contraceptive because they are utilized for the deliberate prevention of conception or impregnation. But that's not
I didn't know that's where the word came from. That's interesting.
what's happening. They're not contraceptive because they're not all stopping conception. Conception, remember, happens at the moment of fertilization, not after implantation. And at face value, contraceptives are marketed as non-abortifacient because they prevent pregnancy rather than terminate pregnancy. But they don't. If you remember, ACOG divorced conception from fertilization, and they termed conception as occurring after the completed implantation. And in this way, they establish the necessary terminological preconditions for labeling birth control methods which kill an embryo that is not yet implanted as contraceptive rather than abortifacient. And once we see this sleight of hand, we can also see that this truth is hiding in plain sight. Without knowing what terminology for which to look, one might never see it. Medical journals and medication inserts and websites all participate in this truth that is concealed, but it's in unrestricted view. For example, the article Contraception on PubMed, which is hosted by the National Institutes of Health, which overviews medications, quote, devices and procedures available to couples to prevent pregnancy, end quote, in the same breath says, quote, birth control methods are designed to prevent conception or interrupt or, listen, nullify implantation and growth. They, at the same voice, said that it prevents
it's
conception,
so pervasive.
but then they right after said it aborts a child that's been conceived. One other sleight of hand: pregnancy.
It's amazing how you know how like folks will get like a legal document in the mail and freak out and then have to go hire some guy to actually translate it for you into real language that people use. It's amazing how just you word something a certain way and and now people don't really know what you're talking about, but it sounds right. It sounds fine. That's what is happening here. I want to go back and listen to that again. I don't know if this is going to do that.
When does pregnancy begin? The ACOG also simultaneously. One other sleight of hand: pregnancy. But then they right after said it aborts a child, interrupt, quote, devices and procedures available to couples to prevent pregnancy, end quote, in the same breath says, quote, birth control methods are designed to prevent conception or interrupt or, listen.
Okay, here's the wording bit, right? This is you can word things in such a way that it sounds like not a big deal, but this is actually abortion, what he's going to describe.
Nullify implantation and growth.
Nullify implantation and growth.
Voice said that it prevents conception, but then they right after said it aborts a child that's been conceived. One other sleight of hand: pregnancy. When does pregnancy begin? The ACOG also simultaneously redefined pregnancy. If the embryo...
Can you see how the enemy uses this, like over time, how the enemy has used a person here and a person there and a group of people here and a group of people there who have these satanic, ridiculous ideas, or just like that freedom means I can do whatever I want instead of I've been given freedom so I can do what I ought, which is true freedom. This is the purpose of freedom. Like the enemy, Satan, uses these people over time to manipulate and deceive and man, like think about Eve and him and Eve in the garden, right? When he's having this conversation with her, it was pretty brief. As far as what we know of the conversation, and it was deception. He didn't just come right out and say, seriously, just try it, try the fruit. That's not what he did, right? He quickly and methodically undermined God's word to her, and he was smooth about it, and this is what he does. This is what he does. So this is why in the scriptures we're told to test the spirits. It's why in the scriptures that one of the chief responsibilities of any elders or church leaders or even fathers over their families and those kinds of roles is to be the ones who aren't deceived. Look at all the look at all the culture, weigh it against the scriptures, and sort out the false from the true, and teach your children to do the same. Help those in your charge to do the same. This is because this is what he does. He deceives, and he's good at it. He's had thousands and thousands and thousands of years to figure it out, to have lots of solid game plans, right? Now, at the same time, we understand that God is sovereign, and the first chapter of Job makes very clear that Satan is, Satan is under God's charge, as I think it was Luther that said that the devil is God's devil. So God is still in charge. God is on the throne. The Lord Jesus Christ is on the throne. It's not, he's the King of Kings. So it's not that Satan has the rule and reign of everything, but it is that he's a deceiver, and he's good at it. And so part of our job as thinking Christians is to be thinking Christians and to see the crazy through the fog.
Did not implant, then they waved the hand and claimed there's no pregnancy. The effect was that a drug or device that kills an embryo, thereby terminating a pregnancy before the completion of implantation, would not be termed abortifacient because a pregnancy had not begun. But historically, in our biology books and biblically, pregnancy begins at fertilization, not after implantation. This is when a new person is made. So please understand this point. Pharmaceutical companies and medical prescribers and medical providers call hormonal birth control, which is abortifacient, non-abortifacient, because they say life does not begin until after implantation. Let me give you one other term. There is another term of deadly doublespeak. In medical literature, a human embryo traveling to the uterus, which is not yet implanted, is commonly called a fertilized egg. A fertilized egg. This doublespeak effectively downgrades the moral outcry of killing a human being, an embryo, through abortifacient birth control to merely the prevention of a fertilized egg from implanting. So in summary, the consciences of everyone playing along in this deadly game of words can walk a little lighter, since the newly formed thing inside the mother is just a clump of cells or a fertilized egg that never implanted, and there was not a baby being killed with their medicine that conveniently controls birth. These murderous redefinitions serve to obscure and radically increase the immeasurable number of helpless preborn image bearers being carried off to death by hormonal birth control. Now, if anybody wants, I have a chart that I've put together that details these realities, and this is the short version. It's just 3 pages. I have a 6-page version. I also have a book that I'm coming out with, and that's why I know some of these things and have studied them for a long time. But this matters a lot to me because we are to fulfill the golden rule. Love your neighbor as yourself. And I consider the unborn neighbors as just as much our neighbors as you or me. And if it's legal to murder anyone, that's an abomination. If it's illegal to murder anyone, it should be illegal to murder everyone. And these contraceptive drugs are truly not contraceptive. All hormonal birth controls are not stopping conception, because they work on the third mechanism of action, which causes abortion. They are abortifacient. And so I would plead with you to not support these drugs and their use. If we are to protect the unalienable rights of all of our neighbors, and the preborn neighbors as well, we must reject abortifacient birth control. And all hormonal birth control is such. Thank you, Mr. President.
Wow. So, that's the man. So there are really several things to you could dive into that for years, right? And he's obviously coming out, or has come out, with a book about the whole matter. There is information out there. It's just not something that we've talked about. This isn't something that's been a hot topic in Christendom, in the Christian world, and it should be. This is a big deal. This is still abortion. It's a method of abortion, and so I would just encourage you, especially if you are taking hormonal birth controls. My goodness, know what you're doing. Ask your doctor if the birth control that you're taking does have that mechanism in it, if it is abortifacient. And maybe don't even word it like that, because you don't want them to be able to get out of it and just say no because of some definitions, like he said. But maybe word it in such a way that you're saying, is one of the mechanisms of this birth control to keep a embryo, as a last resort, to keep the embryo from implantation. If that's a yes, then that's abortion. Doesn't guarantee that the child will be aborted, because, hey, there are 2 warning shots before that. But if those 2 warning shots don't happen and the Lord creates a life, that birth control is made and created to kill the life. Listen, that's a scary thing to think about, and it should be a scary thing to think about. It's a big deal when we take a life. God himself says that the penalty for taking a human life is that the person who has taken the life has forfeit their own life. So, hey, I don't know. I didn't say it. Get mad at God. But until then, till next time, I'll talk to you later.